A millionaire took her virginity and vanished. 5 years later, he finds her with his son. Hey there, my lovely family. How's your soul holding up today? If your heart's been aching for something soft, something real, you're in the right place. To date, I've got a story that whispers of fate, second chances, and the kind of love that arrives when you've stopped looking. So light a candle, pour yourself something warm, and come with me to a place where a lost beach bracelet, a vanished millionaire, and a secret 5 years in the making lead to a reunion no one saw coming. Let's begin. In a quiet seaside town in Southern California, where the sound of waves never ceased and palm trees danced with the breeze, there lived a girl named Emily Carter, a fragile yet resilient soul raised by the only love she had left in the world. Emily had never felt the warmth of her biological parents. Her mother passed away shortly after childbirth, and her father was nothing more than a nameless stranger who disappeared from their lives. He was just a passerby, her aunt would quietly say. He never loved your mother, and he never came back. These words were all Emily knew of the man who gave her life. So she learned early on to stop dreaming about a father, and instead to hold on to the woman who never left her side, Aunt Clara. Clara wasn't her mother by blood, but she loved Emily with every part of her being. She was Emily's maternal aunt, a woman who had once known heartbreak so deeply that she vowed never to marry. Instead, she devoted her life to raising the little girl who had lost everything the moment she was born. Clara wasn't wealthy. She had no status, no grandeur, but she had a heart big enough to shield Emily from the cruel corners of the world. They lived in a small wooden house by the sea, weathered but warm. Their lives revolved around the ocean, the sun, the breeze, and a quiet kind of love that didn't need to be spoken. Emily grew up in Clara's arms, learning kindness, humility, and gratitude from the woman who gave up her world so Emily could have one. Emily was smart, curious, and full of dreams. As a child, she had once wished to go to college to become a fashion designer or an artist. But as she grew older, she began to understand how distant that dream was. Clara took on odd jobs just to make ends meet, collecting seashells, making handmade crafts, cleaning homes by the hour. Every time Emily mentioned university, Clara would fall silent, her voice tinged with sadness. Sometimes, sweetheart, not everyone gets the chance to do what they want, but the most important thing is to live kindly and to be happy. And Emily, young yet wise beyond her years, would simply nod and bury her dreams deeper within. Though they lacked money, Emily never lacked love. She learned to love the sea, to love the sound of the wind, and the wrinkled hands of her aunt threading shell necklaces together. For her, happiness was sitting by the porch on warm afternoons, listening to stories about her mother, the woman she never met, but who lived in every memory Aunt Clara carefully kept alive. It was a childhood filled with absence, but also immense love. A life without biological parents, yet with a woman who gave up everything to make sure this little girl could grow, could laugh, could become someone good in a world that so often wasn't. The sea wasn't just a place of waves, wind, and endless blue skies. It was home. It was where two small lives, Emily and Aunt Clara, found their rhythm, their survival, and their quiet sense of purpose. Over the years, the ocean had become their companion, their provider, and their silent witness to a life lived with love and simplicity. Their small wooden home sat only a few hundred meters from the shoreline. Each morning, Aunt Clara would wake before sunrise, preparing a modest breakfast, usually a couple of toasted bread slices and a warm glass of milk. Emily helped gather their handmade jewelry supplies, shell bracelets, necklaces, and other crafts made from the treasures they'd collected along the beach the day before. After breakfast, they would walk together to the bustling beachside resort where tourists came from far and wide. Among rows of colorful vendor stalls, they set up their humble wooden table, laid a white cloth over it, and carefully arranged their handmade creations with pride. Each necklace told a story, each bracelet held a memory of the ocean. Emily had a gifted eye. She chose the most unusual, beautiful shells and turned them into little works of art. Tourists often paused first for the charm of the pieces, but stayed for the warm smile of the young woman who sold them. Though they never had much, Emily's eyes always sparkled. She never complained, never felt bitter. Every day was another chance to thank the sea for its generosity and to thank the woman who raised her with kindness. Aunt Clara had once told her, "If you live kindly, sweetheart, the skies will always smile back." On hot afternoons, they found shade to rest. Aunt Clara often brought along an old paperback to read, while Emily would sketch in her notebook. She captured the shapes of unique shells, the kind faces of travelers, and sometimes a ship far off in the horizon, places she still quietly dreamed of one day visiting. Some days they barely sold anything, but Emily would smile and say, "It's okay, Auntie. Tomorrow the weather will be better and more people will come." Aunt Clara would smile back, gently patting Emily's head with eyes full of unspoken love. Their life was simple and slow, without noise or drama. But in that peace, their bond, the only family Emily had left, grew deeper with each passing day, like the quiet but steady waves that touched the shore. Emily never wished for riches. Her hopes were humble: to wake up each morning and see the sea, to know Aunt Clara was well, and to keep making beautiful things with her own hands. To her, that was joy. What Emily didn't know was that from their modest little table by the beach, life was about to take a turn. Someone was about to walk into her world, and with him, an entirely new chapter of her story would begin. The sun was slowly rising above the horizon, casting golden rays across the soft sands. The sky was clear, cloudless. As usual, Emily sat beside Aunt Clara at their small beach stall, gently arranging the handmade jewelry. She had no idea that today would be the beginning of a turning point in her life. Among the countless tourists strolling along the shore that day, one man stood out. He walked with a slow, almost thoughtful pace, his gaze searching for something invisible. His name was Daniel Thompson, 32 years old, CEO of a luxury travel company and the sole heir to a prestigious family empire. Despite his charming looks, polished manners, and privileged background, Daniel felt hollow, exhausted from a life that seemed too carefully curated. Success had come quickly, but happiness never followed. Each day was filled with boardroom meetings, overwhelming expectations from his father, and a looming engagement to a woman he didn't truly love. Vanessa, the daughter of his father's biggest business partner. This beach getaway was a sudden decision. Daniel needed space. Space to breathe, to think, maybe even to feel something real again. He stopped when his eyes caught a small wooden table draped with a simple white cloth. Beautiful shell bracelets and necklaces were arranged with care and artistry. But what truly held his gaze wasn't the jewelry. It was the young woman behind the display. Emily. She wore no makeup, no luxury clothes, but her bright eyes and soft smile had a quiet power to them. Daniel stepped closer, his presence calm and respectful. "These bracelets, did you make them all yourself?" he asked, his voice low and warm. Emily looked up, a little surprised, but quickly smiled politely. "Yes, my aunt and I made them, all from shells we collect on the beach." He picked up one of the bracelets, turning it in his hand. "They're beautiful. Each one seems different." "Because no two shells are alike," Emily replied, her tone sincere. "Just like people." Daniel smiled. Her answer was simple, but it struck him in a way he hadn't expected. How long had it been since he'd had a genuine conversation, one without pretenses or calculated intentions? He bought a bracelet. Emily carefully placed it into a small paper bag and handed it to him with a soft, I hope you have a lovely day." Daniel hesitated for a moment, as if wanting to say something else, but instead he simply nodded and walked away. His figure disappeared into the crowd, but Emily's thoughts lingered. There was something in his eyes that stayed with her, a heaviness, a story untold. She didn't know his name, didn't know where he came from, only that her heart had reacted. What Emily didn't know was that just a few hours later, their paths would cross again, and that second meeting would change everything. The evening sun dipped lower, casting golden hues across the shoreline. The waves kept their steady rhythm, soft, almost like the ocean's own heartbeat. Emily began to pack up their stall as the sky turned from blue to amber. It had been an ordinary day, yet her thoughts were anything but. She couldn't stop thinking about the man from earlier, the one with the deep eyes and warm voice. Their brief conversation had left a quiet mark inside her, something she couldn't quite name. Curiosity, perhaps, or maybe a gentle kind of pull. That night, her best friend Maggie invited her to a bonfire party by the beach. At first, Emily declined. She wasn't used to parties, rarely attended anything loud or crowded, but Maggie insisted, grinning like she had a secret. "Come on, Em, you deserve a night to breathe. Who knows? Maybe someone special is waiting for you." Emily laughed and eventually gave in. Aunt Clara encouraged her too. "You should have a little fun, sweetheart. You've earned it." The party was lively, lit by the moon, the crackling fire, and the laughter of friends. People gathered in circles, strumming guitars, telling stories, and letting go under the stars. Emily stayed to the side, content with the music and the salty breeze. Then a familiar voice called from behind her. "We meet again." She turned, and there he was. Daniel, standing in a simple button-up shirt, holding a soda can, smiling in that soft, unassuming way that felt more sincere than any polished line. "You're here too?" she asked, surprised. "My friend dragged me along," he chuckled. "Didn't expect to see you again, but I'm glad I did." Strangely, Emily didn't feel awkward. Maybe it was his voice, or the way his eyes never looked at her like she was anyone ordinary. They sat side by side on the sand, just a few steps from the fire. The guitar strummed behind them, but Emily barely noticed. Her world had narrowed to just his presence and the quiet space they now shared. They talked about everything: the ocean, childhood memories, unfinished dreams. Daniel admitted he once loved photography, but life pulled him into his father's business. Emily shared that she had once dreamed of being an artist, but reality had pushed her toward survival. "Do you ever get tired of it all?" she asked gently. Daniel gazed out at the water. "Every single day." There was a long pause. Not uncomfortable, just honest. Two souls, quietly understanding each other without needing to explain too much. Night had deepened. The bonfire cast flickering shadows across the wet sand. People around them were still laughing and talking, but between Emily and Daniel, time seemed to slow. The sea breeze whispered through her hair, and Daniel watched quietly, as if trying to memorize every detail of her face. She wasn't the kind of beautiful that turned heads in a crowd, but there was something in her softness, her calm, that he hadn't found in anyone else. Emily lowered her gaze, a shy smile on her lips. "You've been staring at me? Is something wrong?" Daniel shook his head gently. "No, I was just thinking, you're very special." She looked up, meeting his eyes. This time, she didn't look away. In that moment, she felt her heart beating faster than it should. There was a warmth spreading inside her, strange, unfamiliar, but safe. They kept talking, but the words had shifted. No longer small talk, no longer polite curiosity. Daniel opened up about his mother, a quiet woman who stood behind his father's stern decisions. About childhood birthdays with wishes that never came true. about growing up in a world where expectations always outweighed freedom. Emily listened. Every word from him seemed like a piece of a hidden world he hadn't shown anyone. Then she shared her own, about her mother she never knew, the emptiness left by a father who never returned, and Aunt Clara, the woman who gave her everything without needing a reason. Between those shared memories, something deeper began to grow. Neither named it, but both felt it. As the party wound down and people began to leave, Emily and Daniel remained, still seated on the sand. The beach was growing quiet. He slipped off his jacket and gently placed it around her shoulders. "You looked cold." Emily nodded softly. "Thank you." Another pause, long and filled with things unsaid. And then, almost as if it was the only thing that made sense, Daniel leaned in. He didn't ask, "May I kiss you?" But his eyes said everything. She didn't move away. And in the next moment, their lips met, soft, tentative, and trembling like the wind off the sea. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't dramatic. Just two tired souls, brushing gently against each other, finding something familiar in a world that had always felt too vast. That night, there were no promises, no declarations, just two strangers who found a moment of quiet in each other's company. But under the moonlight, wrapped in ocean wind and starlit silence, something quietly began to grow, fragile but real. The next morning, Emily woke with her heart still wrapped in the softness of the night before. She arrived at the beach earlier than usual, setting up the stall with care, her eyes occasionally drifting toward the sandy path where Daniel had promised to return. And he did. Daniel arrived with 2 cups of hot coffee and that same familiar smile. From that day on, Emily's mornings were never quite the same. He would visit her booth, linger a little longer each day, sometimes walk with her when Aunt Clara went for a rest. They didn't need many words, just being close was enough. Their bond grew, slow and steady, like the tide. Every sunrise seemed to carry them closer. Yet Daniel never spoke about who he really was or where he came from. Emily didn't ask. A part of her feared that knowing too much might shatter the fragile beauty they had. Then came the day he told her he had to leave. "I have to return to the city," he said, his hand wrapped gently around hers. "Just a few weeks. Then I'll be back. I promise." Emily nodded. She believed him. Though her chest tightened, she smiled and wished him well. But the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. And Daniel didn't return. No messages, no phone calls, no signs that he'd ever been real, except for the shell bracelet he once bought, now kept in Emily's drawer like a relic from a dream. Then her body began to change. Morning nausea, constant fatigue, and eventually a silence where her cycle used to be. All signs pointing to one truth. Emily was pregnant. Panic gripped her, not for herself, but for Aunt Clara. The woman who had sacrificed everything to raise her would now have to face this disappointment. Emily kept it hidden for 2 months. She went to the beach, smiled, worked, as if nothing had changed. But her belly grew, and Aunt Clara's eyes became more watchful. One rainy afternoon, Emily sat alone in her room when Aunt Clara walked in, a towel in hand. She paused mid-step, staring at her. "Emily," she said softly, "is there something you're not telling me?" Emily didn't respond. Tears slid down her cheeks without warning. And in that moment, everything came undone. Aunt Clara didn't yell. She didn't cry out in anger. She simply sat down beside her, quiet for a long time before whispering, "You know, your mother was once in the same place." Emily nodded through the tears. "But I don't want to give up this baby, even if I have no idea what to do." Aunt Clara pulled her into a tight embrace. No blame, just worry and heartbreak. "Then we'll figure it out, together." That night, Emily lay in the quiet, her hand resting gently on the small life growing inside her. Daniel was gone. leaving behind all the dreams they'd barely begun. But in the darkness, she whispered to her unborn child, "Even without him, we'll be okay, you and me." 5 years passed like a long, quiet dream. Emily had changed completely, stronger, braver, and calmer in the face of life's chaos. After giving birth to her son, she left the small coastal town and moved to the outskirts of a big city with Aunt Clara and little Liam, a place where no one knew her past. She took a short accounting course and eventually secured a clerical job at a growing travel company. At the time, she had no idea who ran the company. She just needed stability, a paycheck, and a safe place to raise her son. Liam was now 5, bright, curious, and with eyes that looked just like Daniel's. Many times Emily would catch herself staring into those eyes, her heart tightening. But she never spoke of his father. No blame, no bitterness. Just silence, heavy and impossible to fill. The day the CEO returned from a year-long trip to Europe, the entire staff was summoned to the main conference room. Emily sat near the back, scribbling quietly in her notebook, barely paying attention to the buzz in the room, until she heard that voice. "Good morning, everyone. It's good to be back." Emily froze. She looked up, and in that moment, her heart thundered in her chest. Standing there in front of the team was the man she had once loved with everything she had, the man who vanished without a word, and the father of her child, Daniel Thompson. He had changed. His hair was shorter, his face sharper, more commanding. But those eyes, those were the same. The ones that once looked at her like she was the only one in the world. Daniel, too, stopped short when he met her eyes. For a few seconds, the room disappeared. No staff, no lights, no noise. Just 2 stunned glances locked in a flood of memories and unspoken words. The meeting ended. Emily quickly left the room, avoiding him entirely. She couldn't afford to feel anything. She was a mother now. She had to be strong. There was no space for old storms, but fate wasn't done with them yet. That evening, as Emily was about to leave, Daniel's assistant found her. "Mr. Thompson would like to see you, now." Emily hesitated. Every part of her wanted to run, but she entered the office, where Daniel stood by the window, city lights flickering behind him. He turned as the door clicked open. Their eyes met again. "It's you," he said softly. "I thought I must be wrong, but it's really you." Emily clenched her fists. "I don't think we have anything left to say." He stepped closer. "I tried to find you for years. I didn't know what happened. I never imagined you'd just disappear." She let out a short, bitter laugh. "I waited for you for a long time. You promised you'd come back, Daniel, but you didn't. I had to raise our child alone." The silence was deafening. Daniel stood frozen. Her words hit harder than anything he'd expected. "Child?" he whispered, almost disbelieving. Emily turned away. "It doesn't matter anymore." But Daniel knew it was only the beginning. Emily never imagined that this unexpected reunion would awaken not only long-buried memories, but also a storm far bigger than she could have anticipated. And at the center of that storm stood Vanessa, Daniel's high-profile fiancée he had never once mentioned. Daniel never told Emily that he was once engaged, and Emily never expected that the fiancé would appear so soon. Just days after their emotional reunion, a woman entered the company lobby with a presence that silenced the room. She wore a wine-red designer dress, sleek chestnut hair, and heels that echoed sharply against the marble floor. The receptionist quickly bowed. "Welcome, Ms. Vanessa. You may go straight to the executive floor." Vanessa Scott, Daniel's fiancée, was the only daughter of a financial empire. Her engagement to Daniel was not only romantic, but also a strategic alliance between 2 powerful families. But what Vanessa didn't expect was that the woman who once belonged to her fiancé was now working just a few floors below. That afternoon, Emily was summoned to the executive floor, not by Daniel, but through HR. She assumed it was a routine matter until she walked into the room and saw Vanessa waiting. Silence. Vanessa stood up, her eyes cold as they scanned Emily from head to toe. "You're Emily Carter?" Emily nodded. "Yes, that's me." Vanessa stepped closer. No pleasantries. "I just want to know, what do you want from Daniel?" Emily blinked. "I'm not sure what you mean." Vanessa gave a dry laugh. "Oh, come on. I know you two had a history, but Daniel is engaged to me now. His family, his future, everything. It's already decided. I don't care what you two had, but if you think you can slip back in—" "I don't want anything," Emily interrupted, her voice calm. "I'm here to work, not to ruin anyone's life." "Good," Vanessa said, lips curling, "because women like you don't survive long in our world. It's not built for sentiment." Emily didn't flinch. No tears. No reaction. She wasn't the same girl from years ago, easily broken by words like these. At that moment, the office door swung open. Daniel walked in. He stopped short at the sight of the two women standing opposite each other. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice taut. Vanessa turned. "Just having a little chat with your employee." Emily remained silent, locking eyes with Daniel. Just one look, and he understood things had gone too far. "Vanessa, you have no right to speak to her like that," he said, his voice firm. Vanessa's face paled. "So she still matters to you?" Daniel looked at her, unflinching. "Yes, she does." The air froze. Vanessa stormed out, furious. Emily left quietly, not because she felt small, but because she knew. If Daniel truly wanted to protect her and their son, he would have to stand up against an entire world that never welcomed her. 3 days after the confrontation with Vanessa, Daniel still couldn't sleep. Emily's words echoed again and again. "I had to raise our child alone." A child? He had a child? All these years, while he searched for her in vain, a small life, his own blood, had grown up without ever knowing his name? Daniel couldn't wait any longer. That afternoon, he drove to the address his assistant had quietly provided, a quiet neighborhood on the city's edge. Emily wasn't home. It was Liam who opened the door. The little boy stood before him, soft brown hair, wide dark eyes, and those familiar arched eyebrows. Daniel froze. His heart pounded violently. "Are you looking for someone?" the boy asked politely. It took Daniel a few seconds to find his voice. I'm a friend of your mom's. Is she home?" Liam shook his head. "She went to the store, but you can come in and wait." Daniel stepped into the modest home, feeling like he'd wandered into a dream. He noticed a small drawing taped to the wall, a stick figure holding hands with a woman and a man. Underneath, in a child's handwriting, it said, "Me, Mom, and maybe." Daniel felt his knees weaken. Everything was simple, clean, and everywhere, signs of a child. Toys neatly stacked, crayon drawings on the wall and on the table, a photo frame. Liam smiling in Aunt Clara's arms. Daniel couldn't look away. His throat tightened. Liam sat across from him, watching curiously. "How old are you?" Daniel asked softly. "I'm 5. I just had my birthday last week." 5. Exactly the time after he left. He had missed everything. "What do you like most?" Daniel asked again. Liam grinned. "I like drawing the ocean, and I love my mom the most." Daniel nodded, blinking fast. He wanted to hold the boy, whisper, "I'm sorry," but he didn't dare. Then the door opened. Emily stopped cold at the sight of them sitting together. "What are you doing here?" she asked quietly. Daniel stood. "I had to see him. I couldn't go on without at least seeing my child." Emily looked at him, then at Liam. still happily sketching with his crayons. "I never kept him from you, Daniel. You disappeared. I just didn't want him to grow up hoping for someone who might never return." Daniel took a step forward, then stopped. "Let me try. Let me be his father, even if it starts now. I've lost 5 years. I don't want to lose another day." Emily looked into his eyes and saw the regret, the pain, and the love, not just for her, but for the little boy now, drawing quietly between them. She didn't answer right away, but she didn't close the door, and Daniel knew some doors remain open, because deep down, they're waiting for someone to step back in. After that meeting, Emily didn't say much, but she didn't stop Daniel from coming back either. And Daniel did return, every afternoon after work. At first, he only stayed for 10, maybe 15 minutes. He'd sit and draw with Liam, build a few block towers, ask gentle, awkward questions like, "What's your favorite color? Do you ever have dreams? Do you have a best friend at school?" Liam was too young to grasp the complexity of it all, but he could sense something. The man who visited wasn't just any stranger. There was something familiar, something warm. And most of all, he saw that his mom didn't look away when she spoke about that friend anymore. Daniel began learning everything from scratch, from tying Liam's shoelaces, to buying the right kind of crayons, to reading superhero comics he didn't understand. He'd never changed diapers before, never made a bottle, never been scolded by a 5-year-old for buying the wrong cookies. But he learned, and Liam taught him with the innocent trust only a child could give. One rainy afternoon, Liam had a fever. Emily called Daniel for the first time. "If you're free," she said softly, "you might want to come. He's calling your name in his sleep." Daniel arrived in under 15 minutes. He held Liam, wiped his sweat, and stayed by his bedside all night. And when Liam finally opened his eyes the next morning, the first thing he said was, "Daddy, don't go again." Those 2 words shattered and healed Daniel all at once. He wrapped his arms around his son, eyes red. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere again, son." From that day on, everything changed. Daniel was no longer that familiar stranger. He was Dad. A word that filled his chest with both pride and the heavy ache of all the years he missed. Emily still kept her distance, but she no longer held him back. She saw Daniel changing, becoming more patient, gentler, and more sincere than he had ever been. One day, Liam asked, "Mom, why didn't I have a dad before?" Emily paused for a long moment, then gently stroked his hair. "Because Daddy had to find his way back to you. And now, he's home." Liam grinned and nodded. "Then I forgive him." Daniel overheard, standing just outside the door. He turned away, quickly wiping a tear. His journey as a father had only just begun. Awkward, slow, but true. And sometimes the things that arrive late are the ones worth holding on to most. Daniel sat alone in his office, soft amber light casting long shadows across his folded hands. Outside, the city gleamed with pride. Skyscrapers stretching into the sky, symbols of everything he had once believed defined success. And now, he was about to walk away from it all. He thought of his father, a man who never once said, "I'm proud of you," only offered expectations, deadlines, and a gaze that always felt more like judgment than love. For years, Daniel had done everything to meet that gaze, earned the right degrees, inherited the right company, proposed to the right woman. Not because he wanted it, but because he thought he had no other choice. Until Emily. Until Liam. Since that moment, everything he once believed was essential now felt hollow. The boardrooms, the contracts, the luxury cars. What did they mean if he couldn't recognize his own son's laugh? If every birthday, every fever, every scraped knee happened while he was closing a deal? Daniel knew the cost. He would lose the CEO title he had once worn like armor. He would lose the approval of a family that never truly knew him. He would lose his place in a world he had bled to enter. But he also knew, if he held on to those things, he would lose the one thing that could never be replaced: a little boy who still called him Mr. Daniel, and a woman who had once loved him enough to wait, until her heart could no longer wait anymore. That night he sat in silence, staring at a photo on his desk: Emily and Liam smiling beneath a paper umbrella. A photo his assistant had quietly left behind. Daniel could no longer live between two worlds. He loved Emily, he loved their son, and he knew if he didn't take a stand now, he would lose the only thing that had ever truly mattered. That week, Daniel held a press conference, inviting the full force of the media. Vanessa wasn't present, nor was his family. Just one man, standing alone, facing the storm. He began with a sentence that silenced the entire room. "I'm calling off the engagement." He continued, his voice calm but firm. "Vanessa is a good person, but this marriage was never about love, and I can't promise a lifetime to someone when my heart belongs elsewhere." The news exploded. Social media went wild. Headlines dominated every platform. CEO Daniel Thompson ends engagement, secret child with employee? Scandal in the Thompson dynasty. His family was furious. His father threatened to cut him off. The board pushed for his removal as CEO, and just as promised, Daniel lost nearly all his shares in the company. But he didn't regret it. That night, he stood at Emily's door. No briefcase, no bodyguards, only a man stripped bare, finally free. "I lost a lot," Daniel said, "but I kept the one thing I was most afraid to lose: you and our son." Emily didn't say a word. She simply stepped forward and took his hand for the first time in years. No grand declarations, no applause, just real love, strong enough to stand in the middle of a storm. In his hand, an open box, inside a silver ring with tiny engraved words: "You brought me home." No gold, no diamonds, nothing extravagant, but her heart trembled at the sight. Daniel looked up at her, eyes misted. "I've spent too many years chasing the wrong things. I won't ask you to forget the past, because some wounds can't be erased. But if you'll let me, I want to spend every day from now making it right. For you, for Liam, for our family." Emily stood frozen, lips pressed tight. Her heart ached, and yet it softened. Liam ran up and grabbed her hand, bouncing with excitement. "Say yes, Mom! I want Daddy to stay with us forever." Behind them, Aunt Clara stood at the window, hand over her chest, eyes shimmering with tears. Emily looked back at Daniel, the man who once left, but also the man who had returned, having sacrificed privilege and pride to choose love again. She stepped forward, knelt with him, and took his hand. "I don't need perfect. I just need honest. And you've become that man." Daniel didn't speak. He simply slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands shaking. Liam jumped up, shouting, "Yes! Daddy's marrying Mom!" Aunt Clara laughed, wiping her eyes with the corner of her apron. There were no fireworks, no flashes, no fancy crowd. Just a backyard bathed in golden light, a child's giggle, and a love finally chosen. Not because it was easy, but because it was real. That night, under the stars, they sat together, holding hands in silence, knowing that something had shifted forever. Not just promises, but the beginning of a life chosen together. A few weeks later, Emily and Daniel's wedding was simple, held in the small backyard garden where he had proposed, where they had once cried and now finally smiled. There were no lavish gowns, no orchestras, no flashing lights, just loved ones, a few close friends, and one little boy standing between two grown-ups with a beaming smile. When the officiant asked, "Do you accept this man as your father?" Liam looked up at Daniel, then back at his mom, and nodded with confidence. "I do. He's my dad." The guests erupted in cheers. Daniel knelt down and hugged his son, tears of joy falling freely. A few months later, the family moved back to the seaside town where it all began. They restored the small house and right beside it opened a souvenir shop filled with seashell crafts, beach paintings, and handmade gifts, each one echoing their shared memories and love for the sea. Daniel was no longer a CEO. There were no meetings, no luxury suits, no headlines about stock prices. But he had never felt wealthier, waking up each morning beside the woman he loved, preparing the shop together, listening to Liam's stories every evening, and knowing that every time he held Emily's hand, he was holding his entire world. The story ended just as it began, with a sunset by the ocean. The three of them walked hand in hand along the shore. Waves gently rolled in, the breeze was cool and kind. No more heartbreak, no more goodbyes. Only a small family, whole and peaceful, against the wide, beautiful world. And that's where their story comes to rest. Not with grand gestures, but with quiet love, second chances, and the kind of family that's built one honest day at a time. If this story touched your heart, even just a little, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell me, would you have forgiven him? And if you want more stories that make you smile, cry, and believe in love again, don't forget to subscribe and join our little family here. Until next time, take care of your heart. It's been through a lot.